Howdy, all. It's Friday, and we're more than pleased to have Kevin Allen back on the show. Guys, I wanted to bring up something I was watching last night, and not on purpose because, Ottawa Buffalo doesn't exactly have playoff ramifications right now, but I was out with some friends at a local establishment, and the game was on TV, and it got to a shootout, and Mike Hoffman was going in during the shootout on Robin Lehner, and he did the usual serpentine going back and forth, and he cut in front of the net, and Robin Lehner just stuck the stick out and tripped him. Like, they put the stick out, and Hoffman's right skate went over his stick, and he fell, and he tripped him, but he didn't get a shot off, so they didn't do anything. There was no penalty because it's a shootout. I thought there would be some sort of ramification there, like if you tripped him, it would be an automatic goal or something like that, but apparently not.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I didn't know that either. I really didn't. I've never seen that. So
I just saw it. He reached out with his stick, Kev, as he was turning and just hooked him, and he went right down. And you would think he would get another shot for that.
Yeah.
Or just give him an automatic goal. You would think there would be some sort of negative effect on the goalie. You would think if it's not a penalty, you got to write something up about this, because otherwise goalies could do this every time.
Well, or worse. I mean, what if they just take their paddle like it's a battle axe and just go out and whack the guy one time?
Yeah. And the thing was, it was not Russ. If you saw the replay, it was not him going for the poke check.
Oh no, he went right for the skate.
Remember the old rule when it was like a breakaway, a partial breakaway, or a one-on-one, and the forward was coming in. If the defenseman had knocked the puck off the stick before he tackled the forward, they usually didn't call the penalty. Well, right. In this instance, he didn't go for the poke check. He was going for the trip, and the only thing I can remember, extrapolating on what you just said, Kevin. Back in the World Cup of Soccer in the 80s, it was a France-Germany game, and the West German goaltender, the player had a breakaway, and he came out and jumped up and double-kneed the French forward in the head. What's to prevent a goaltender from charging out of the net and just knocking the forward down, if that's part of it?
Well, I mean, I'll bet that'll get talked about at the GM meetings.
It will.
Yeah.
It'll come out, and that almost every rule that comes about because they didn't think of it before, and it happens, and you got to address it. Like, you can't think of everything, but it's amazing that here we are, 10 years later, and there's still things people, everybody's always looking for an edge.
Well, here's the other thing too. And I don't want to feed into this too much, because Flyers fans will always think, hey, the refs are always against us, which is never true. But we are in the age of review. And yesterday, Wayne Simmons gets completely tripped on purpose. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, Tommy Wingles is free. He gives a head man pass to Brian Giunta, and he gets an easy goal. And it's like, somebody on the ice has to say something about that. There's no way everybody in the ice could have missed it. Like, it was just so blatant. And, you can't give free goals this time of the year when games are this important.
Yeah. And the points lost right now, I mean, we'll talk about that Bruins game, because it was two. I was flipping around after I got home and watched a little bit of that game, and it was 2-2 late in the third, and then Marchand scores before the end of regulation, and the Flyers lose. I mean, that point could be a big difference between making and missing, or being third place in the Metro, or being in the wild card. So every point counts.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get the show started here. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, March 9th, 2018.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Kevin Allen from USA Today Sports.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, Kevin, yesterday we talked extensively about the whole situation in Carolina with Thomas Dundon relieving Ron Francis of his duties. I mean, we know that it was he was promoted in title to president of hockey operations. And I heard interviews with him where he said that, he wants Francis as part of, the decision-making structure. But I was struck by the whole, well, the new GM is going to report directly to me, and the emphasis on hands-on with Dundon. I've heard comparisons to Mark Cuban and Jerry Jones. I don't know how far afield those are, but what is your read on the situation? Because this was, there was GMs who a lot of people thought were going to get fired, and Francis, I don't think was one of those that everybody thought it was going to happen to.
Yeah, it's interesting. When it happened, I think the reaction to me was the same as everyone else, and that is, oh boy, this is going to be an owner that maybe is over medals. But, when I thought about it, the 5-year rebuilding plan is now extinct. It's gone the way of the dodo bird. And, you don't get 5 years. And this is the 4th year. And if they miss the playoffs, and it looks like they will, this will be the 9th consecutive year. And Ron Francis has been the GM for 4 of those. We should have expected this, and maybe we didn't see it coming because, most of us thought that Francis has done a good job, and he's a classy guy, and he's a smart guy, and he's operated with one hand tied behind his back because of the, salary cap considerations and so forth. But in the real world, if a team performs the way the Hurricanes have for 4 seasons, the guy gets fired. In fact, he gets fired a year before. And the game has really changed now in terms of expectations on general managers, and 4 years is a very long time. And, it doesn't mean you got to win within 3 years, but you've got to show remarkable progress. The only reason why Kevin Cheveldayoff and could get away with as long as he has for waiting for the team to perform was, you can look at that roster and say, oh boy, it's coming. Everybody knew that the Jets were going to be a good team, and this is the year that it came.
But what about Garth Snow, though? Garth Snow, I think, has only made the playoffs twice in his whole tenure.
Well, it's shocking that he's still there. I mean, I think most people would say that's true. But for the most part, I think the expectation around the league is that you get 3 years and you better show remarkable progress in 3 years, not just a little progress, not just the light of day, but. So
I get what you're saying, and I agree with you on one level. On the other level, he has built up the farm system. It's just about there. When Jake Bean gets there, it'll be pretty much there. They will have assets to trade. It almost seems like the owner got in there. He saw for a month and a half that he didn't get done what he wanted to get done at the deadline. So he makes a move, and it's his right. He's the owner. It's his business. But at the end of the day, this happens a lot, right? This happened to Dale Talon in Chicago. Ron Francis built up this team. He gets pushed upstairs. He'll transition out at some point, I'm sure. And the new guy who comes in will get credit for all these young guys when it all kicks in. Now, if he got fired on the basis of this trading deadline, which it seems there's some of that, a lot of GMs could have gotten fired based on this trading deadline because it was hard to make good trades.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my reaction to what you just said is that's the way it's been forever. The guys, Brian Burke used to, talk about that he benefited when he got to Anaheim from, that his cupboard was not bare. He was one of the few guys that would acknowledge that. So that's just kind of part and parcel of how it works. But, if you had to ask me that, whether or not Ron Francis was doing a good job, I would have said yes. I thought, I liked this team, and most of us thought they were going to be improved. I think he paid a price for 2 reasons. One is the owner wanted a more aggressive general manager. If you look around the league now, the top GMs, the guys that we all respect, Hoyle, Rutherford, Steve Yzerman, even Dale Talon, even though that team is, not for sure in the playoffs, George McPhee. The one trait that they all have is they're really, really, really aggressive general managers. They're movers and shakers. I mean, Carlson was in, McPhee was in on Carlson for the final half hour. And I think ownership looked around, and he is friends with Cuban, and Cuban's aggressive as well. And I think he wanted, and that's not Ron Francis. That's not his makeup. And I think the other thing, from what I've been told, that really, really hurt him is that he really was all in on Darling and was really a big believer in him. And that's been a disaster. There's no other way to look at that. And
but it's not a horrible contract that's going to cripple the team.
No, not at all. But it was, I think Ron Francis, basically sold everyone on the idea that this was going to be really a game changer for us. And, he had kind of discovered the goalie. And that hasn't been the case. And they didn't make any progress. And this is the one thing that when I've talked to GMs around the league, they've all pointed out, because everybody loves Ron Francis. But, I've asked the same question. What is your take on the team this year? And the team is they've stalled. Like they didn't get any better. They're exactly the same team. Some of the guys aren't playing as well. Some of the people that everyone thought maybe might take a step up. It just didn't come together. So, I mean, as I said, I think everyone was shocked because everyone sort of viewed Ron Francis doing a good job. But I think when you look at it, in his fourth year, they should be farther along.
Let's say he got aggressive, Kev, and he traded Noah Hannafin for Derek Brassard. And look, we saw George McPhee at the very end in Washington get overly aggressive because he was desperately trying to win a cup and made a really bad trade. What if he had made that trade? Would that have kept his job, even though clearly in the long run that's a bad trade? I don't
think so, because everybody knows Brassard is not a number one center. So I don't think he would have saved his job in that regard. But
or if he traded Brassard for a comparably aged forward. We know that they need center. We know center help. There wasn't anything at the deadline. They were in a position where they're overloaded on defense, and they have something that a lot of teams out there want, but you don't want to get taken to the cleaners. And trading a 21-year-old in Hannafin for a guy who's going to be a free agent after next year is not a move that anybody would make unless they have a gun to their head. But if he could have, and I think this is what the new GM will do, is it's either Hannafin or Falk or one of those defensemen. They're going to try to trade for somebody who's of the same age as Hannafin, for a team that's loaded with forwards. And a team like Winnipeg, if they lose Trouba or somebody that would make a bit of sense, or Toronto with their load of forwards. So I think that, but Francis struck me, Kevin, as being a little conservative and loving his prospects, and he should, because I think a lot of them are good, and maybe he didn't want to pull the trigger on that type of deal that is pretty risky.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. But again, I don't know that we know that was exactly what happened. I mean, I think we're speculating on that. But I do think that the owner and look, I think alarm bells should sound for the one line in his press release when he said he's going to report directly to me.
Yes.
Well, that's a little bit, it sounds like it's going to over meddle. And, we saw what happened. You brought it up earlier when, that happened in Florida, and it set him back 2 years, because Dale Talon was on the right trajectory. Yeah. The owner thought, well, I got my guys in there. Maybe, this job doesn't look so. I mean, I don't know if he thought this, but the way it came across is, well, GM job's not that hard. I'll have my guys kind of do what he was doing. And they moved Dale out, and what happened to the team? And now Dale's back in, and suddenly things are looking better again. So,
Kev, what do you think? There was two things. I was checking around yesterday. Let's say it takes a week to 2 weeks to get someone in that position, right? They're going to miss out on that college free agent window, because they're not really going to have anybody there that somebody's advisor is going to take as far as gospel as the direction of the team, right? Because we don't know the direction of the team at the moment until it's sort of announced with a new guy. And then you'd have to believe this is going to get filled before the draft in case they make any changes there, right? And you hope. Now, if I'm a Hurricanes fan, I hope they don't do what Florida did and basically ignored the scouting report from the previous regime and decided to just do their own thing because they were a new and improved Florida Panthers. That's a danger too.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I would believe that they'll for sure have a GM by the draft, but I don't think it's going to happen in 2 weeks. Don't you think you got to wait till the season is over and see who's available?
I mean, I would have thought they would have waited till the season was over to make this kind of decision, to be honest.
Well, that was the unusual thing, was the fact that
but there were rumors swirling whether Francis was going to resign, like what was going to happen, and I think they were just I don't know, I'm just guessing here, but trying to get ahead of it. I mean, it was a messy situation. Like, that could have been handled better.
Right. I said that yesterday. Like, to me, you could have told Francis, hey,
right,
you're the owner at the end of the season. This is what's going to happen, and we'll announce it at the end of the season. But they didn't do that. They grabbed headlines by doing it right away.
This wasn't exactly Gerard Gallant and the cab.
No, it wasn't that way.
No, not at all. And but I mean, I think, again, if everybody takes a step back, the only this really isn't that big of a stretch to fire Ron Francis based on the history of this league. What makes it unique is the way it was sort of handled, when it came, and the fact that the owner said, the new GM is going to report to me. But 4 years, that's a long time now. The way we do things.
Now, the unusual thing is, Kevin, is that this was the first coach or GM fired this year. That's very, usually Eck writes a column and like around, I would say, December, what coach is the first one that's going to be fired.
Right.
And so far, I mean, maybe it's the fact that a lot of teams are doing badly, like Arizona and Buffalo. They have first-year coaches. If those were long-term guys like Bilesmore, Tippett, that were the previous coaches, maybe they would have been victims. But GMs, I mean, we mentioned Garth Snow. I mean, I think there's a couple out there that once we get to like April 12th, just before the play, that Monday, Tuesday, in between the last game of the regular season and the first game of the playoffs, you're going to hear a couple names.
Yeah, I don't know. I told you, based on what I'm hearing, it's 50-50 with Garth Snow. He may be safe. I know everybody thinks he should be out, but I'm telling you, he may be safe, which is crazy, but that may be the way it is right now.
I don't know. Like, the handling of this Tavares situation, to me, is very befuddling.
It is.
Now, you never know what's going on. Like, what is the direction he's getting from ownership, and what does he know that we don't know?
Right.
With regard to what John has told them. So, there could be more to it, and then you hate to get too far ahead of it, but frankly, this Islanders team has really not behaved like you would expect for a team that really should be pushed all in to try to make the playoffs.
There was no desperation at the deadline. They didn't make a move, and I wouldn't have advocated an irresponsible move, but I thought a goaltender with their goaltending being as inconsistent as it has, or their defense that's had a bunch of injuries, I thought they would have tried something. Now I think they've lost 8 in a row now, so the playoffs are way out of there's no way now. So now it's whether they have some sort of agreement with Tavares, or there's some understanding of, well, I'm going to give you the last crack. I'm going to go to that 5-day window.
That's the understanding, but that doesn't mean you're going to keep them.
No, I mean, unless they're prepared, Kevin, to write a blank check. And the thing is, I don't even think that's going to work. It's like, it's got to be more than just, I want to make the most money. It's got to be, do I have a chance to win? And with this organization, the way they've been operated the last, the way they've been run the last few years, I don't know whether they ever can.
Well, here's the interesting thing about that. Or two things. First of all, about the goalie situation. Like, they reached the conclusion there that, and I think this is true, that before the trade deadline, their goaltending had been better. Now, it had been better, but my thought on it was, it's no different than during a game when sometimes your goalie gives up 3 goals, none of which were his fault, but you change the goalie just to kind of shake up the team and get everybody thinking a different, because there's no greater way to change a team than to change the guy in net. So, this wasn't a game, this was the season, but why not do that? Like, why not have competed and got Peter Mrazek, and we can talk about whether that's going to be a good move or a bad move for Philadelphia. But let's just say, why didn't just bring in an inexpensive goalie?
Right.
Just change it up. Just to see. Like, that's what I didn't understand. Like, there were guys available that you could have brought in that wouldn't have cost you much, that at least would have sent a message. All right, we're going to try to get him spark.
The thing that makes you it makes you scratch your head, Kev, because the GM is a former goalie. You would think, if nothing else, he would have a good handle on that, and he has the least handle on that. Like, that's the thing he has the worst handle of. It's bizarre.
Well, here's the point I wanted to make about Tavares too. I had an exercise when I went through with a GM on the phone talking about, he pointed out that, everybody talks as if Tavares has got a clean board that he can go to. And he said, we've gone through and looked at it, and how many teams can really afford or really, have the space and roster configuration to bring him in? He said it's very limited. And he goes, I've heard like the Montreal Canadiens. And he said, I laugh at that. He said, I don't know John Tavares personally, but I know enough about what happens in this game to tell you that I am 90% certain that he is not going to sign with the Montreal Canadiens.
Sure. Right.
And he said, if you go around, there are teams he's just not going to sign with.
Right.
If they have the cap space. So he said, what you're talking about right now, he said, John Tavares is looking at maybe 2 or 3 teams. And what he has to decide.
I think 3 teams is right.
And he said, what he has to decide is are those 3 teams? Because all of those 3 teams, are there. There's something about them that, isn't perfect, for him. And he said he's got to decide, is the comfort he feels in Long Island with his teammates, is that worth more than going to this one of these other 3 spots? And,
but he knows if he walks through the doors of MSG, he's got a goalie. They are resetting, and they probably could be competitive next year if he's there. Like, he knows that.
And they could offer him. They could offer him
a lot of money. They have cap space.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard
the money's going to be the same. Everybody's going to give him the money.
I don't think the Islander money will be the same. I don't think they'll match everybody.
I think it will be.
Well, Russ, the thing is, if it isn't, then he's definitely gone. I think the one thing that you can go back to in terms of the Islanders is the 8th year and them basically, I mean, they're not in cap trouble. They have money dropping off. I think they have 10 or 5 million.
And they're not making tons of money, like I said yesterday, and it's 3 years from a new arena, and so that's why I don't think they're going to offer him the most. Like, Vegas could probably offer him the most, right? Because they have the least amount of money on the books.
Right.
But he probably won't go there because he's probably not going to be comfortable in that city. So that's where you say, okay, that's probably not a fit.
And I could be completely wrong here, but I mean, there's always been this speculation that, after Stamkos in Toronto, that Tavares in Toronto would be a natural. I don't think they're going that. I don't think the Leafs, they maybe they would be interested in Tavares if he would sign out like a 1-year deal, which he's not going to do. He's going to look for the max, and he's looking for as much money as possible. But with them having to pay Matthews probably next year, I don't think you can pay Matthews $12 million and then sign Tavares for $10 or $11 million. So I think this fallacy that Toronto is out there in the Tavares sweepstakes is just that. And
I don't think the biggest problem with the Islanders, and this has been going on since DiPietro retired and really since he was drafted, they can't produce a homegrown goalie. Everybody talks about the Flyers and rips them. The Islanders' situation's even worse. Now, they have a couple of guys now in Sorokin and Soderstrom, but they're still a couple of years away. Think about the last time they had a good homegrown goalie. They've been signing free agent goalies and older goalies forever now, and just doing temporary fixes. And Kev, if I'm Tavares, like, I got to look at that, because now I got to look at these 2 young goalies and talk to somebody and decide, can one of these guys be the guy? Because literally, he could be giving up another 2, 3, 4 years of this deal, which is getting deep into his career, before he really has a chance to win the Stanley Cup.
Well, and you're always just guessing, like with the prospects. I mean, like he could go get all the experts in the world to tell him, well, what do you think about these 2 goalies? And you just don't know, especially with goalies. That's the hardest thing to kind of project. I mean, you think these kids are going to be good, but you don't really know. But getting back to your original question, Mike, and I think it's a good one, is like, who's in trouble among GMs? I mean, you got to start with Peter Chiarelli and at Edmonton. I would venture that he's gone. And that means McClellan will be gone as well.
Right.
I think Bergevin is in trouble in Montreal. That would be my sense as well.
I think so.
I mean, it's strange that he would be in trouble. I mean, yes, they can eat money, but they just signed him to an extension, just like Dorian was signed to an extension in Ottawa, and to fire him after you've already extended him is just
it happens. It does happen.
It does happen, and
it does happen, but not very often. That's why I think you're being bold if you think he's in trouble, but it just doesn't seem like they're headed in the right direction at this point. And I know I'm sympathize with Bergevin because I really like him. He was one of the funniest guys.
He is a likable guy, and he's not a dumb guy. He's not.
No, I think he's really, really smart, but it doesn't help him. He has said so many times, well, there's no number one centers available or whatever. And yet, I look around and, guys like Jim Rutherford always find a way to get what they need, and, David Poyle traded for a number one center and Ryan Johansson. You can get it done. You just got to be creative.
He doesn't want to give up the assets. That's the one thing about Bergevin is he had built some assets. He doesn't like to give them up, and it is hurting them. There's no question.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
But he did give up a top asset in Sergachev for Drouin, and if you look at Drouin, like in the second half, he's fallen off.
Yeah, but Drouin's not going to kill you long term. Like that trade, yes, Sergachev. You'd all like to say yes that they won that trade because he's a defenseman, right? End of the day, they'll find the right thing for Drouin. I've watched him play this year. He's been playing pretty good. It's just a bad team, so I'm not worried about that trade so much.
And the fans were sold at him being a center, and
and that really was never going to happen.
Yeah, but they sold it, Russ. He was their number one center on opening night.
I know, but that's what you have to do sometimes when you're not able to do it. I mean, look, even the Rangers had to get Zibanejad and put him in the number one spot. Is he a true number one center? No. Was Derek Stepan a true number one center? No. There's tons of teams that don't have true number one centers. It's not just those teams.
Now, Kevin, I don't think this guy is in trouble because he's a Stanley Cup winning general manager and extremely well respected and, considered one of the best GMs in the game. But we do know that, Ken Holland's contract runs out at the end of the year, and all the speculation has been Seattle, like that. That's going in hyperdrive. That Seattle is going to get named the 32nd team probably by June or July, and that that Ken Holland will be the guy who runs Seattle. What have you heard, or what do you think of that scenario?
Well, I don't know what to make of it. I think that nobody in Detroit seems to have any idea what's going to happen there. It's hard for me to believe that the Ilitch family would throw him overboard. Marian Ilitch still has a say in the family business, and she is quite fond of Ken Holland. It's hard for me to believe that Ken would want to kind of start over. Now that is out in his neighborhood. He's out.
It is
from BC. And nowadays, it's not quite the horrible job that it once was. I mean, George McPhee has pointed out that you can, actually, renovate your career by taking over expansion. I mean, he's now, the level of respect for George McPhee, but for what he has done there is at an all-time high.
What if it's just Holland wants to be closer to home and be closer to where he was from? Like they can't fight.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, we just don't know. Like no one seems to know. I've talked to a lot of people who know Ken really well, and no one has a real handle on it. And he's under tremendous pressure in Detroit from the fan base, which a lot of GMs can ignore that. But Ken is overly sensitive about the fan, unrest, and so we're going to have to see what happens there. He knows what the issue is. He has said publicly we have to draft better. I think one of the things that's lost on people is when Jim Nill left, that was a major loss. But he also took with him other scouts, and they were really good scouts. The Red Wings have never really, to me, their problem has not been, they always point out, well, we've been so good, we've drafted so low. But my criticism of their drafts would not be with what happened with their first picks, but what happens with their lower round picks.
Right, I agree with you on that.
You look at like the New Jersey Devils this year, and they're benefiting from a fourth round pick who has been a terrific rookie, and the Pittsburgh Penguins, every time they need to plug a hole, it's some guy that they've drafted or Ray Sherrill drafted before Rutherford got there that plugs right in and seems to be a player. And the Red Wings don't have those guys. You look at down their roster, other than the top guys, they're not getting those later round picks that are, plugging in and helping.
Well, I mean, I could give a preview, Kev. We're talking about the Red Wings this week on Hockey Prospect Radio, and so in a couple different ways with the Red Wings, and then we're also talking about their AHL club. And when we got into discussion about the AHL club, really it's Philip Roenick, there's Dominic Turgeon, Svechnikov's coming along, but we don't know exactly where he's at.
And he just got called up.
Yeah, and he just got called up, and Caro just got called up, and after that, yeah, it's thin there.
Well, and it may be
a lot of veterans.
It may be oversimplistic, but I mean, the Swedish pipeline, which is what they got all those players in 4th, 5th, 6th rounds. That it's sort of dried up now. It may be the fact that other teams, like Toronto and other organizations have put a lot more stock in European scouting in Sweden, in Finland, and Russia, and they don't have that exclusivity anymore. But I mean, that does have an effect. They may have been able to rely on getting players in those late rounds, and now there's too much competition, and
it's caught up to them that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's something to that, to be sure. So, yeah, I mean, there's Tyler Wright is under a lot of pressure in Detroit too. To deliver.
And he's a busy guy. Like, he's hard. Just so people know, this guy is literally everywhere. When we try and pin him down for our show, sometimes he has to cancel because he's on a flight here. He's going to there. Like, they're working hard, but it's not the easiest thing to do when you're trying to build it up again from the ground up. It really does take a long time.
Now, Kev, do you? This is sort of switching to coach rather than general manager, because I think Stan Bowman is safe in Chicago. But there has been a lot of talk throughout the year about, Chicago sort of tailing off, and maybe Joel Quenneville. Now, the thing is, if Joel Quenneville gets fired, he'll get gobbled up in 3 seconds. But there has been some talk of the possibility of maybe Quenneville getting fired in Chicago. What do you think?
Yeah, I've heard that as well. And I just wonder whether if he is fired, it would be under the flag of that they just need a new voice. And because, how can you – but look, Dean Lombardi won Stanley Cups in Los Angeles in 2012 and 2014. By 2017, he was unemployed. I mean, that's
not true. He is working. He's with the Flyers. He's just like undercover with the Flyers.
He's on double secret probation. That's what he's
out there, Kev.
Yeah, but
But he's not working as a GM. He's not.
Yeah, he is not working as a GM. But so my point is that it doesn't take long. Like you soon forget that what you did in 2014 doesn't matter anymore in 2017. So,
well, but here's the thing: is it possible, Kev, that Quenneville just wants out, and it started with Yarmulson, almost like what else could you take away from me as a coach? I'm not a miracle worker here.
Yeah, well, maybe, but I don't know.
He walked out of the draft. I've never seen a coach, especially from the home team, the host city, walk out of a draft. We've never seen that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know what to make of all that, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's gone one way or the other, but
I can start the speculation right now. If they clean house in Edmonton and Quenneville gets fired in Chicago, mark my words, Quenneville coaching Connor McDavid will be, I don't know if it'll happen, but I'm saying, the temptation of having arguably the league's best 21-year-old and being a guy who could, maybe turn that around. Babcock came to Toronto to turn the Maple Leafs around and win a Stanley Cup, and that would definitely bolster his reputation. I think it would bolster Quenneville's reputation, and if it even needs.
But not every coach wants that, Mike. Like, remember, Phil Jackson didn't go to the New Jersey Nets. He could have tried to turn them around, and he shied away from the job. Like, sometimes coaches don't want that massive challenge either.
Yeah, he went to the Knicks and collected $15 million. He could hit the lottery and collected $15 million.
But Russ is right. In Detroit, everybody wants Steve Yzerman to come back, but
right.
Why would he come back? Like,
exactly.
It could only do bad things for his reputation. Like, he's God in Michigan. So why would he leave this incredibly good situation he has in Tampa to come back where, he can't get bigger or have a greater reputation in Detroit than he has now?
Right.
So, I don't know. The challenge of winning in Detroit, Detroit's won before. It's not like he's, bringing them back. So I don't see him ever come back to Detroit. Why would he leave? I mean, he's got a great owner in Tampa.
Yep.
And he's done a good job there. And
they have a deep farm system. Like, they got everything going for him.
Yeah. The only and I'm not saying he's in danger. I don't know, but look, just based on like their lack of progress, getting to a conference final or winning on a consistent. I mean, they've made the playoffs, but Minnesota has sort of been like a middle of the road team. They've been a playoff team. They've been a successful organization, but I just wonder, they've never gotten to that next level, and I wonder how long Chuck Fletcher, whether he's in trouble or whether it's something that they'll just stick with him. And I know he's a good hockey man, but I wonder. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I think at some point he has to be held accountable. That they've failed to progress. We keep seeing almost the same team every year, and they don't perform quite as well as we think they should. The only thing I would say is in Craig Leopold's short, it's not like he's been around 40 years, but he has been around long enough that he's got sort of a reputation and an MO, and he's a pretty loyal guy. Like, he's not a guy that throws people overboard. So it'll be interesting to see. But like, if they flame out again, I don't know. Someone has to be held accountable.
Speaking of which, Brad Living has to be a name in that list because his team might be flaming out and they shouldn't be.
Didn't he get the extension?
It doesn't matter, Mike. I mean, again.
Well, it does. I mean, it does. It matters in this way. I mean, Russ, that there's only been a few guys who have gotten fired after their extension. I mean, it has happened, but
no. But think about it. Think about the preseason expectations for this team. Sure. And he is the guy in charge. Brian Burke really is not the guy in charge, right? So he's not going to take the brunt of anything. But if the Calgary Flames don't make the playoffs, that's a massive disappointment because I even thought they could go pretty far in the playoffs. Yeah. And then to not make it at all, and then to see what happened to him last year, like I think it could be iffy with him too. I really do.
Well,
I don't think so, but it's just a guess on my part. He might be my Ron Francis. Where when I'm done, I got to take another step back and go, well, shoot, because I like Brad Living, and I think he's so I may take a step back and go, Russ was right.
The funny thing is that, and nobody expected this after they made this deal. When we were at the draft, Russ, and we hear that they trade 3 high draft picks for Travis Hamonic. I don't think anybody thought that the first round pick that they were trading in that deal would be a lottery pick. But if Calgary misses,
that's another issue in all of this too, Kev. It's true that Hamonic deal has not worked out well.
Yeah, speaking, you mentioned Ken Holland as the Seattle guy, and I tend to believe they would want to go with one of the younger sect, maybe like McCrimmon in Vegas, who's been through that. And
I don't know. Vegas went with McPhee though, and he's not young. No offense, George. No offense.
Well, yeah, but
he looks good. He does.
Yeah. But a guy that I think that no one's talking about that I would consider if I was it would be Brian Burke. If you're a guy who's been around the block, who's has spent a lot of time out in Vancouver, is known for his organization, his management. So he'd put together a great system. And you're still. I mean, not that if you got 32,000 names and deposits, you don't need to do too much selling, but you want to still market the team, and he would be a big boy. So,
no, Burke would be a great guy for that because even if it's just for the first couple of years, for the first 2-3 years, I could see there's merit in that for sure.
He would do something for that burgeoning Seattle Vancouver rivalry because
Well, I talked to Lewicki. I'm doing a big piece on that next week, and I talked to Lewicki, and they sold 1,000 tickets in Canada, which
that's good,
really significant. Yeah,
and you know what? In terms of the success and the turnaround of the Toronto franchise and MLS and E, Lewicki is not given as much credit as he deserves in retrospect because not only did he hired Brendan Shanahan, he hired Masai Ujiri as the Raptors GM. and he's had a lot of success. They're one of the best teams in the NBA right now. And, so he put them on the right track. He hired the right people. He stayed out of their business, and then he went someplace else. And, now Toronto, just transitioning to them, and then we'll get off the GM talk. A lot of stuff came out last week on last week Saturday about Lou Lamoriello's future, and we've talked about that off and on. But it's starting to gain a little momentum during the week because it's thought that Kyle Dubas, who they signed to an extension last year after he got some interest from Colorado, that he may get interest from Carolina or from other teams, and that the Leafs probably will not give any of these teams any permission. It looks, Kevin, like they're saying, keep your hands off of Dubas. He's the next guy. But the question is, when? And,
well, here's what I think you got to do. I don't have any idea, but I'm guessing they might have overpaid Dubas with the idea of that, look, you just got to be patient. You're a young guy. Lamoriello deserves to go as long as he wants, but, he can't do this job at 80. Right. So sooner or later, and maybe what you say to Lamoriello is, Lou will give you 2 more years or whatever it is. And, to me, he's going to want more than 1, but you can't give him 3. So maybe 2 is right in the middle. And then you just, it's all above board, and you just work it out. And, he gets paid, Dubas gets paid, but Lou gets to stay around, and it can all work out in a very positive fashion.
Yeah, it worked out well. I remember when the Jets did that with Bill Belichick. It worked out great. Just
the one thing, Kev, is that Shanahan has said at one point during the year that he wants to keep the same group together in the immediate future. And that makes sense, especially with the contracts coming up right now with Matthews, with Nylander, with Marner. I mean, they may not sign Marner this summer because he's got another year on his entry level, but especially Matthews and especially Nylander. And look at the job that Lamoriello has done getting Kadri, Anderson, Riley, a number of the players signed to more economical deals. He did the same thing in New Jersey. He's doing the same thing in Toronto. And if you can get Matthews and Nylander for a little less than everybody is expecting, that can have ramifications down the road. So that's why I think they want Lou maybe to stay around maybe 1 more year. Then I think that they're going to have to give Dubas the job pretty soon because they're basically blocking everybody else from and he I think he wants the job. Obviously, it's a plum job, but eventually you have to actually give it to him.
Well, you do, but I do think because it is the Maple Leafs, like they have the right to ask him to wait 2 years if that's what it takes. Because it is such an incredible job. And to be honest, I don't know where he's going to go, but there aren't too many places to me that's worth that I got to go now to if you have a promise you're going to be the GM of Toronto in 2 years. So like if Lou wants 2 years, I give it to him.
Well, here's the thing. All right, so Kev, let's say Seattle says, Kyle Dubas, you're our new GM. We got to take you now, though, because you've got to start doing things ahead of time before we get the franchise and everything else. Would he do that leap, or would he take the Leafs on his word that it's going to be 2 years, even though he's been waiting a long time? That's probably the battle too.
Well, it would be, but if I was him, I would wait it out. So
Shanahan's going nowhere,
right?
Yeah. Shanahan's going to be the president for the foreseeable future. So, and I think with that in place, that Dubas's place as the next GM is, there's they've kept everything in-house. Nobody knows for sure what's going on. That's prototypical of the Leafs under Lamoriello, and I don't think we ever will know. All we'll know is basic little whispers, and we won't have any indication. Right. They'll just drop it on us on one day.
Yep.
And it might already be done.
Yeah. That was the speculation that after the whole Colorado thing last year, they had a meeting and it was aired out in the open, how long Lou's tenure would be, and then they signed Dubas to a 2-year extension. So, and according to other reports, he's being paid handsomely. So that's consistent with what you just said, Kev. So I think it's either going to be this summer or next summer. Maybe they give him 1 more year, and because I don't think Lou is going to take a senior advisor role in a back seat. He did that in New Jersey for about 5 seconds, and then got
No, that's right. And and it's really, this job has reinvigorated him. So
yeah. All right, couple things about this, the schedule and where teams are going right now. Maybe it's possible that Nashville is peaking too early, but I'll take a 10-game winning streak right now. They're playing amazing hockey. Rene is playing incredible. They're healthy, relatively healthy. I mean, Kevin, I don't think it's out of the question to say they're the odds-on favorite to go back to the Cup from the Western Conference again.
Completely agree, and I'm not so sure they're not the favorite to win it. They're so much better than they were last season, and they seemed to be almost a team of destiny last year. So, the key in all that, and you just hit upon it, is Rene's still playing at an incredible high level,
right?
And that's the key for them. But they have so much else going. I mean, they're top 4. Who can compete with that? I mean, Tampa's
I'm still sticking with Anaheim. I think Anaheim could still give them a really hard time, and I'm not going to count Anaheim out.
Well, this is the NHL, so you can say that, and you're absolutely right, without fear of contradiction. But I do think the Nashville's been very, very impressive at the way they've.
They've been great. I mean, and they don't seem to have many weaknesses. But sometimes matchups, like it's just matchups of styles, like in boxing. Sometimes you just never know. Two teams match up, and then it just doesn't go the way you expect.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, no, that's right. You're right.
And I Russ, Anaheim has come on in the last month or so. They got Kessler back. Most of their injured players are back. I mean, Gibson had that little hiccup a couple weeks ago, but he's back. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10 games. They're experienced. They have veterans. They're
they're built for playoff hockey. You can see it.
Yeah, right. And then in consecutive years, they basically had bad first halves with injuries, and then second half they get everybody back and they just go on a roll. And I think that's probably going to be the case this year. I don't know if they can, we know that it was Gibson's injury and Bernier playing in Game 5 and Game 6 that really killed them. I think their advantage is the fact that I think Vegas is starting to come back down to reality. I mean, they're 500. They beat the Red Wings last night. They're 5-4-1 in their last 10 games. They're still playing great. They're still playing way beyond expectations. But I look at them in the playoffs, and if they face LA or if they face Anaheim, Kev, that to me that ends the Cinderella story.
Well, they got. I just wrote a story about that this morning. They have Dallas if it ended today. But what's interesting about that is, and you're right on. I actually chuckled to myself because this is going so well for the Golden Knights this season that even this, they lost 4 games out of 5. Even that, they saw the silver lining in that. Like, they needed some adversity, is the way they sort of phrased it, because everything had gone so well for them. And they're beat up. Schmidt's hurt, Neal's hurt, Riley Smith is hurt, Sabiza's hurt. They have 7 guys that are out of. I saw them in Detroit last night. They have 7 guys that are hurt. So they're dealing with some injuries, and they're kind of trying to deal through that. But the other issue is, and I'm sure Russ could comment on this too, but they were playing sort of playoff style hockey in October, and
right.
Teams usually can't do that. But they were just so jacked up. And now I think the top teams are playing at a higher level, and I think the league is kind of caught up to them a little bit. So it's much harder for them. And
short of Fleury's shutout yesterday, you're right.
Yeah, they're just so. But I would, as good as they've been, I would be surprised if they made a long playoffs. Like, I believe in them, but I also think that Predators are a great team, and they've been there and they're experienced. And we've talked about the Ducks and how good. They could have easily gone to the finals last year as well, the Ducks. So there's just a lot of good teams there that have a lot more experience in the playoffs than the.
Yeah, and
here's the one thing for the Ducks, though. I truly believe that if the Regina Pats season ends sort of quickly, you could see Sam Steele playing for Anaheim. He is ready, and that could be a big guy to add to that lineup with the skill that he's got and everything else, and the smarts and just the youthful legs to all of a sudden come in. I mean, I think that could be big.
Yeah, no, and the Predators are going to get Tolman in. So
yeah,
there's going to be some younger players, some infusion of talent, and boy, Hartman has really fit in well. And
oh yeah, I mean, you knew he would though.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. So.
And Dallas might be a little easier for Vegas to beat now that apparently Martin Hansel is out for the rest of the season. He's out for 6 to 7 months. I think it was a hip.
Mike,
injury.
we do have some breaking news.
Go ahead.
Matthew from the chat room said that per Pierre LeBrun, Carolina has requested to speak to Michael Fuda. And, Michael Fuda is one of those names that you would expect with Dubas that would be on the cutting edge for Carolina to want to hire.
Yes.
Here's the thing. I mean, I know Mike. I see him at events. I don't know him personally. He seems very comfortable in LA. And he gets paid way more in his position than most guys, than even other GMs.
Sure.
Like Kevin said, he gets paid well. I don't see him going to Carolina and leaving LA, not for that job. I don't think he would do it for that job. That's just my guess, though.
No, but the funny thing was, and we Kevin, we mentioned a bunch of names yesterday, and they were the usual suspects. Julian Brisebois, Pat Verbeek, Tom Fitzgerald. The two names that came up. Peter Tessier mentioned Lawrence Gilman. That was mentioned by LeBrun yesterday, and Dave Nonis was mentioned as well, which is not surprising because we know his tenure in Toronto was a little problematic, but he did do a pretty decent job in Vancouver for a time, and so we don't know what direction they're going to go. But Fuda, you're probably right, Russ. I know the Leafs were interested in him when they were doing their original search, and it didn't even get close. So, flipping to the East, and then we'll end the show here. Tampa Bay is running away. They'll have home ice advantage through the conference final. They've added all their. It's basically the New York Rangers South in Tampa Bay, and
Ryan McDonough said, "Don't call him that. I don't want to piss off Ryan McDonough, so I'm not going to call him that."
Well, okay, but how many ex-Rangers are there right now?
I know. It's the same way with when the Rangers had all the Edmonton players. I get it.
Right, and Kevin, until the Pittsburgh Penguins are vanquished, until they're beaten, I'm going to continue to think that they're going to be the one. But I have to say that it's not Marc-Andre Fleury backing up Matt Murray. It's Tristan Jarry, and if it's Tristan Jarry, then I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to be in the Stanley Cup final from the East.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. The one thing I do think that has occurred is it amazing to me that nobody is really sort of raving about how good Malkin has been.
I was just going to talk about that, Kev, but I didn't want to interrupt you. He's having a hard year. He is. He is
having an unbelievable season, and his numbers have been remarkable over the last, month and a half. And they're just playing at a high level. It's like anything else. And we said this last year too. Is their defense good enough? And they didn't have Letang. It didn't look like they were good enough. They got Letang now, but they're not quite as deep as they were a year ago. Daly is off that team now. There's no Ian Cole, who played pretty well for him. So it's interesting that for as good as a job as Jim Rutherford has done, and he's done an unbelievable job, there's a little unrest in Pittsburgh over the loss of Ian Cole.
Sure, I could see it. Because it's the perception. But again, I watched Pittsburgh down a couple guys, really doing the Flyers. The Flyers had that 2-1 lead and then never really had a chance. And I got to tell you, Tristan Jarry made some unbelievable saves in that game. I've always been a supporter. I do think he's getting better. Do I think he's cut better? Not necessarily, but when you have a team that knows how to win the Stanley Cup, you know what? A goalie like Tristan Jarry probably could win the Stanley Cup because they have so many guys that have that experience.
It's just the unknown factor, Russ. It's the fact that that we knew Fleury could do it because he didn't know 9. We knew Murray could do it last year, and they had that plan B that was most teams don't have that kind of luxury. So
the one thing Jarry's got going for him is he's playing in games that matter, where it's not like he's playing like Penguins have like a 20-point lead and he's just mopping up the rest of the season waiting for the playoffs. He's playing in games that matter with a really high intensity, so that's going to help him.
And the other two teams I want to touch on before we end the show, Boston and Washington. With Boston, they've been struck by the injury bug. I mean, there's no question that they're still playing at a high level, but Bergeron is out, and I think they're just being careful with him. It's only, they said 2 weeks. I think they'll probably give him another week because him being at close to 100% is, they need him to be that effective. And McAvoy out for 4 weeks. Now, I know Rask was out for a little bit, but then he came back yesterday and played.
He was good yesterday, but I'm going to tell you something. Boston plays on the edge as Marchand plays on the edge, and Marchand's been one of the best players in hockey for the last month. However, the dirty factor in that game against the Flyers was on display, and they got a lot of favorable calls. They did, and they're going to have to get that to make it to the Stanley Cup because I think they do have a talented team, but I also think that's the way they're going to have to play. They're almost going to have to be that team that everybody hates.
Yeah.
They hate Marchand, and you make mistakes against them. But they're also going to have the refs calling in their favor because they, like I said, that game yesterday was a tough one for the Flyers in a couple of different calls. And look, I know the Flyers used to have a reputation for being that kind of team. They're not, but the Bruins are.
And Marchand got fined today for embellishment by the league.
Yeah.
The other one,
care. He doesn't give him a contract anymore.
Of course he doesn't. Kevin, the other team is Washington. I mean, they were impressive last week in that outdoor game in Annapolis, but Holtby, they went out on the West Coast, played Anaheim. Holtby gets pulled. I was shocked. He's been pulled from a game 7 times this year, which is, that for a goaltender of his high standing, that's a little surprising. And I think, they've had a good season. They're going to make the playoffs. Ovechkin has been phenomenal, but the problem is that they never really replaced that depth, and their defense is not as great as it was.
Well, I think the biggest issue for them is, and the one that actually is a positive for them is that nobody's talking about them. Maybe after all the high expectations and believing that this was going to be the Capitals' year and then them disappointing everyone, now no one's talking about them. Maybe that's what they need. Maybe they need to fly under the radar a little bit. But Ovechkin is playing terrific. Their defense, Carlson's had a really strong season. Their defense is still pretty strong, and if Holtby measures up, they're still a factor. They're capable of beating, top teams in a 7-game series. So, but they're just not as deep as they were. That's the biggest problem.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem. It's the team in front of them. We said it yesterday. I don't think it's all on Holtby. I don't.
And they have to slay the Pittsburgh Dragon.
Yeah,
again. So many teams have had teams that block them along the way. And if you do want to win a cup, you could ask, the Knicks with the Chicago Bulls. You could go in so many sports, and that's always the case. And there has to be a year when you do it. Otherwise, you'll never do it.
Yep.
All right, guys, great show. Thank you very much, Kevin. We will be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.